Boker Tov. Today's daf is daf ayin in Mציעא, as we learned for Achenu Beis Yisrael and Sodom Shivya, Boker Tov and Chodesh Tov. At the end of the third line on daf ayin Amar Aleph, Amar Rav Hanan. Rav Hanan said this. Remember, it was Rav Hanan. He's quoting this. Rav Hanan said, Amar Shmuel. It sounds like he heard it from Shmuel. I said this in the name of Shmuel. Mos shel Yisomim, money of Yisomim, mutal avos and ribis. You're allowed to lend out money of Yisomim, poor Jewish kids, poor Jewish orphans under bar mitzvah. You're allowed to lend it out for ribit. That sounds strange. What are you allowed to do an avera with? Just because they're children, you're allowed to do an avera with their money? I'm going to have Nachman Mishum Diasman, just because they're orphans, Safinali Isur, you're going to give them Isser? You're going to make money for them, interest, you're going to put that in their bank account? And just because they're orphans, you're allowed to give them Isser? Yasmi the Achli Yisomim, the achli lavtu, that eats something which isn't theirs, which is interest, doesn't belong to you. You're not allowed to take interest. It's like stolen money. If they eat something which is not theirs, lizlu bazar shavkayu, they will follow those who left them over, right? Their parents are going to follow them into the grave. You don't want to do that. So Rav Nachman said to Rav Hanan, I can't believe that Shmuel really said that. Doesn't make any sense. Amar lei, so he said to Hanan, Emali, tell me truth. Tell me Izu, tell me the truth. In truth, tell me, really, Gufa the Ufta, what was the story? What was the story? Shmuel couldn't have said this, that you're allowed to take interest on behalf of Yisomim. Tell me the story. Maybe you extrapolated from the story and I'll correct you. Amalei, tell you what happened. Who do the B'nai Mar Ukfa? Mar Ukfa had died, and these were his orphan children, and they had an urn, a large cauldron that they had. Shmuel took care of it for them. He held it for them. He waited when he lent it out to people, and he waited when it came back, meaning it was made out of copper. And when it was used, every time it was used, it diminished a little bit. Let's say it weighed 10 kilo when they lent it out, and when they brought it back, it weighed only 9.5 kilo, because the fire and the heat had diminished it, had depreciated it, had damaged the cauldron. That's what he would do. Not only that, Shakal Agra, he took money for it. He rented it out. He rented out this cauldron, this urn for the children, and he waited it out. Shakal Agra, so in other words, he took a payment for the rental, Shakal Pachsa, and he also took for the depreciation, for the damage that was done to the cauldron. So that's what he did. Now, does that make sense? Iagra lo pachsa, we learn if you took a reward, you shouldn't take if you took a fee, let's call that a fee. If you take a fee, agra, that's what they take in the Hebrew also, we call that an agra fee. You take a fee, you shouldn't take money for the depreciation. Ipachsa, if you take for the depreciation, lower, you shouldn't take a fee. Again, what's the problem with that? Because if you take money for the depreciation, that means that you lent it to them, like lending money. They're fully responsible. They got to return it intact, right? They got to return the whole $100 or whatever the item was. So if they're paying for the depreciation, that's like a loan. When you take a fee on top of that, that's like ribit. Of course, it's not ribit oraisa, which is ribit ktsutsa, where I lend you $100 and so you got to give me back 120. That's for sure ribit oraisa, which goes back, which can be reclaimed in court. But this is at least ribit drabanan, because it's a full loan. Loan means I'm responsible for it. You lend me money, I got to pay it all back. You can't say I lost it on the stock market or I lost it in the street. And then if I'm paying a fee on top of that, that's rebid. So that's why Rabbi Hanan said that was the story. And apparently he allowed this ribit to be taken because the cauldron that Shmuel lent out on behalf of the children, not only did he take for the damage, but he also took a fee. So that's like ribit, Amrlei. So Rav Nachman answered, Kiha, that's what you're talking about. Afilu b'diknanani namishari. Even if they are bearded, meaning even if these children are bar mitzvah. When we say orphans, yisomim, we're always talking about little children under the age of bar mitzvah. Once they're bar mitzvah, they're full adults, right? Afilu b'diknani, even if they are bearded, that's also mutter. Even adults are allowed to do mutter. Why? To do that, because they accepted upon themselves the depreciation, the wear and tear, the nachsha of the copper. The kama the mikli nachsha, whenever the copper is burnt and it's on the fire, but it's worth less. In other words, over here, what happened was this. He charged them, when he charged them, It wasn't like he charged him for depreciation and he also took a fee. The fee would be considered to be interest. No, there's two kinds of depreciation over here. There's depreciation because it weighs less, right? I gave you a 10-kilo cauldron or urn, and now it's only 9.5. So I paid you you have to pay me for the half a kilo of the depreciation. And you also have to pay because the copper itself is worth less because it's more burned. As the copper is burned, it's worth less, it goes down. So these are both depreciation. It's not like there's a fee, it's a standard fee, $10 a day. That would be considered like interest. Here, it's all part of the depreciation. There's less metal that you're returning to me, and the metal that you're returning is also more damaged because it's burned. So that's a different case. Amar Rabba bar Shila. Once you're talking about your children, we're talking about Yisomim over here, because that's how it started off. You're not allowed to take. We saw yesterday, you can't, and we saw for the last few days, you can't take something and put responsibility on the person, the recipient. He's responsible for half. That means that it's like a loan, and then the other half he's working for you. That's like rebit. So we talked here about children. So it goes on. Amar Rabba bar Shila, Amar Rav Chisda, Amilo, Amar Rabba bar Yosef, Amar Chaim bar Rav Sheshes, Moshe Yisomim, money of Yisomim, mutar al-voson, you're allowed to lend them out. Karav l'schav rachok lev. So what does that mean? Where they share in the profits, they don't share in the loss. Now, for adults, we say that's really like rebit. It's not really rebit. It's not rebit, but when you lend it out as a where they don't share in the loss, but they share only in the gain, that means like the recipient is fully responsible for it. And we don't allow that with adults, but he said for children we allow it for Yisomim because for their upkeep, because otherwise they will be poor, destitute, they won't have anything. So he says, Karl l'schar, Yisomim, Rashi says, Notlan chelik l'schar, they don't take a loss. Of a ribbis mamishlo, it's that you can't really take ribbis. You can't say, okay, I'm handling the children's money. We don't want them to eat up all their money. They have $100 the father left them. So I'll lend you the $100 and give me back 120. That's straight out ribbit. You can't do that. Avu ribbis mamishlo, says Rashi. Elamashi istakim masayim yechloka. But what their money gains, they'll split that. So even though by bearded people, meaning adults, lavribis mamashu el abak ribis, it's only abak ribis. Umidarabana, it's only sort of rabana. Yasmi by Yisam lo gaz because we don't want their money to disappear. So even though it's also midrabanan to do that, if I lend you money and I say, look, if it's lost, it's your fault. That means you're fully responsible. And if I gain, I'm going to split with the gains. So adults can't do that, but Yisomim we allowed to do that. You can't take ribbit, straight out ribbit, but you could do this for Yisomim because it's only an Rabbanan. Tan Rabbanan. Karl l'schav rachok lev said if adults are doing this, that's a Russia. Don't do that. The rabbis forbade that. Again, where I share in the profits and I don't share in the loss, that means that you're totally responsible and yet I share in the money. That's like avak ribbit, and that's usher. Karl l'hefsav rachok l'schar. Let's say I share in the loss and I'm not gonna. I share in the loss and I don't share in the gains. That's a chassid. That's a pious man. It's like I'm giving you money. Karl l'zeh if they're equal. In other words, it's a fair investment. Everybody invests. Both. We're equally share in the losses, in the profits and losses. Or it's unlikely that either one of us will lose. In other words, meaning that there's an equal chance for me to lose or to gain, or whether it's likely to lose or gain, or unlikely to lose or gain. That's the average person. The average person, in other words, he knows that his chances of gaining and chances of losing are about the same. Then it's a fair deal. But if I'm only going to gain and I'm not going to lose, that's like ribbit. What do you do with money Yisomim? This is a common problem. People, parents die, God forbid, parents die young, left little children. What do you do with the money to protect the money? If they just, what are you going to do with their money? How do you protect it? We set up a court. No, it's like an apotropos, a guardian. We give them the money in installments, a little bit at a time. You don't want to give the children all the money at one shot, right? Because then they might lose it. So you give them a little bit at a time. But the principal will be lost, will be consumed. In other words, they have X amount of money. If that money cannot be put to use to make money, then eventually it'll all be lost. So what do you do? Okay, you talk and say, Rabbi said, what do you do with them? And he said, well, I just give them a little bit at a time, but it'll still get diminished little by little until there's nothing left. What do you do? But Kina and Gavra, I searched for a person, Islay Dava Pricha. I searched for a person who has pieces of broken gold. If I find a man that's broken gold, then I know he's rich. If I find him with gold items, maybe somebody deposited with him, maybe it's not his. But if he has gold pieces, gold bullion in his house, then he's a rich man. I guess Rashi doesn't seem to have the words Naktin and Davamine, but we take the money from him. In other words, we buy the gold bullion from him. And then we give it back to him, so we give it to him as an investment where the children will only, they will not share in the losses, only share in the gains. In other words, we find a wealthy man we know, how do we know he's wealthy? Because he has broken pieces of gold, meaning get gold bullion. If he has golden pieces of stuff in his house, maybe somebody else deposited with him and kept it for him. It's not, it's his. But if he has this gold bullion, that's probably his. So he's a wealthy person. You have who to go after. And he's probably a smart investor too, right? And since he's wealthy, if he, cheats them, there's what to collect from. And give the money to him and invest it with him where they share in the profits, not in the losses. Low. But if it's a fixed item, in other words, if it's a specific item, if that's all he has, if he doesn't have broken piece of gold, like he has fixed vessels or whatever they are, vessels or items or menorahs or whatever, low dilma pikadnenu, maybe they're a depositor with him, and Vasimari, and the owner will come, Yoav Simon will give a simon v'shakale. In other words, we only want to invest with a person where he has money, he has assets. So some don't have the gear so that you buy it from him. Rather, you say a guy like that, he has money, and invest with him where they only share in the gains and not in the profits. But if you just see, how do you know he's wealthy? Because he has these broken pieces of gold. But if he has just instruments and ornaments and vessels and things like that, maybe they aren't his. Amar Bashi, that's fine if you find a guy like that. Go find a wealthy man who's willing to accept investment on these terms. If you don't find a man who has this kind of wealth, broken pieces, what do? What's your choice then? Again, the question that he had raised before. Rabbi said to Rabbi Yosef, if you don't find a man, so Rabbi answered Rabbi Yosef, well, I find a wealthy guy like this and invest with him. So Rabbi Yosef said to him, yeah, it's fine if you can find a guy like that. If you can't find a guy, what are you going to do? Same problem that you raised with me before. The money will just get consumed little by little as the children eat it up. You see a man whose assets are secure, meaning nobody has any claims against him, right? They're quiet. There's nobody's got any claims that he stole anything from them. And he's trustworthy. And he listens to the laws of the Torah. And he has never been ostracized or been put under cherem by the rabbis. And there's a man who's a God-fearing man who's trustworthy and well-known. And you give him the children's money under a court order, like under a guardianship, and invest it with him, again, where it's where it's likely that they will make money, they will split the profits and not split the losses. Says the Mishnah on the base. We had this mentioned, we mentioned this the other day, that makabla, in other words, you cannot accept tzom barzal. Tzom barzal means really what it literally means, iron flax. What it means is that I guarantee everything. Remember, what was the case we talked about the other day, where the case of Iska, where you have a balabai who gives money to a worker, to call him the recipient, for 50, they'll split the profits 50-50. So we said in that case, the recipient effectively, half of it is a loan. That's the part that he's working for himself, and he has to accept the losses and the gains on his half. And in return for that, he's working for the balabayas' half. Well, that's profit. That's rebit, because he's working for the owner on the owner's half in return for his loan. And that's like rebit, unless the owner pays him. Well, this is even worse. This is where the recipient accepts full responsibility. He's not responsible for half, and he gets the profit loss half. He accepts full responsibility for any losses. Same comes on Dazim Yisrael, that's clear out ribis, meaning the owner gives me something, I'm the recipient, and I have to guarantee any losses is my loss. And any gains we split. So that's clearly a loan. alone. I'm responsible for any loss. I have to give it all back. And then in return, I'm giving him profits. So that's rebid. So there's no chiddush in that. You can do it from a goy. As we saw, goy, you're allowed to give ribbis to and allowed to take ribbis from. We're going to talk about that in the next stop. So you could do it from a goy, because a goy, what's the problem? That you're going to give him ribbit, that's mutter. For love and mehen, and you're allowed to borrow money from goyim, and you could lend money to them with ribbit. The ger toshev is a goy who lives in Eretz Yisrael and at least keeps the zayin mitzvahs b'nei Noach. Okay, the same thing. V'chein beger toshev. Mal b'Yisrael mosef shel akum midas akum avalom midas Yisrael. The Gemara is going to talk about this in tomorrow's daf. What does that mean? Mal b'Yisrael mosef shel akum midas akum. If let's say a goy, there's different ways to learn, but the way Rashi I think learns is that a goy borrows money from Reuven with rebid. Then he wants to pay it back and he meets Shimon, and Shimon says, Shimon's another Jew. He says, I'll tell you, give me the money that Reuven lent you, and I'll pay him back the rebid. So it was via a goy, right? The Jew lent the money to a goy, and then the goy, instead of returning it, he met Shimon, and Shimon said, listen, I'll take the same terms, I'll return. So if it's via the goy, he says, Malva Yisrael Mosav Shel Akum Midas Akum. If the goy says it, Avalom Midas, if the Yisrael is involved in it, in other words, he gives it back to Yisrael, he can't do it. Gemara will explain that case tomorrow. Says the Gemara, the name of the B'shustim Kabbalah Kaima. What's going on over here? He says, listen, Yisrael, because it's ribbit, right? If I accept it under terms where I'm fully responsible and yet I'm giving him the profits, that means that's like ribbit. That means that the item is considered to be in my rishus, like I borrowed it, like money that I borrowed to you, I could do with it as I please. The same thing over here, since it's ribbit, it's like a loan, and you're saying that it's in the rishus, it's under the possession of the recipient. That's why you call it ribbis. If it's not, if I do your shlichus, you ask me to do something for you, take something somewhere. It's not mine, it's yours. But if you're lending it to me, it's mine. I have to return the money, but it's mine. It's basically mine. You're saying that's why it's called ribbit for a minute. If you accept tzom basel from goyim, let's say real animals, doesn't mean iron animals. It means you accept animals from goyim. Let's say it's a short cast of oil, an animal can be bought as a carbon. Hamakabel tzom basel from goyim. Vlados Turman Bachora. Now, there's no question that the goyish animals, you accepted these animals to take care of, and you're going to give the goy the profits, right? So the animal itself belongs to the goy. The animal itself belonged to the goy. And if that animal had a firstborn male, a bechor, right, that becomes kadosh, right? But it doesn't. It goes to a goy. What do we say every day? Kadashli kochor, peter korechem. Israel, right? Only Jewish animals are a bechor. So the mother is for sure. In other words, the animal itself, if it's a she and she gives birth, that animal for sure is not, the baby is for sure not a bechor. But let's say when you're makabel son barzalman and achri, meaning you guarantee it in return for what? For splitting the profits, right? So if it's from a Jew, you can't do that because it's rebit. But wait a minute. When you accepted it, right? What do you say? You're going to share in the profits and the losses. Let's say that animal has a baby. That's part of the profit, right? We discussed that yesterday, right? That's part of the profit. If the animal has a baby, a vlad, so you're going to split that, right? You're going to split that. Let's say that baby has a baby. Is that baby, the baby is partially yours, right? The first baby is partially yours, half the Jew, half the guy. It's belongs half to the Jew, half to the guy. Okay. So Makabel Sambaz himself, the Vlados themselves are patur from Bechor, even though it's partially owned by a Jew, right? Because the Jew accepted this animal, right? And the animal that was accepted from the guy had a baby. The baby was a female, and it had a baby. Now that first baby was partially, as part of the profits, half mine, half the guy. So Vlados are patur Bechor. Now, why are they patur Bechor? If it's partly Jew, if it's partly Jewish, why do you say it's patur Bechor? The Jewish part of it is chayiv in the Bechora. So it should be chayiv on the third generation, the grandchild, right? Should be chayiv in Bechor. Oh, very good. It depends. Our mission is speaking about, in that case, the owner. This wasn't really Bechor. In that case, it wasn't really Son Barzo. The reason why it's patur Bechora is because we're assuming now that the owner, the goyish owner, accepted full responsibility. He accepted full responsibility. So the Gemara asks right away, if he accepted full responsibility, why are you calling it son barzel? Son barzel means that the makabel, the recipient, accepts son barzel. I'm right Lakash. And how do makabel it's on Savazal Lala? Our Mishnah is speaking about where the owner accepted full responsibility. Hello, kabbalah Savazola. In other words, really the other way around. How to kabbalah Savazola? That case is speaking about where the goyish owner accepted full responsibility. Our Mishnah is speaking about where the owner did not accept full responsibility. That was on the recipient. Okay. If the owner accepted owns Savazola full responsibility, meaning loss and the any full responsibility means accidents and depreciation, etc. Son Barsel, so why are you calling it son Barsel? If you're saying over there that the owner who gave the tzon to the Jew and then had a baby, and the baby had a baby, you're saying where the owner over there accepted full responsibility. Why did he call that's not son Barsel? He just said, do this for me, but he didn't don't accept any responsibility. But if that's the case, why in our Mishnah do we say, why did our Mishnah say you can't accept Tam Basil from a Yisrael, but you could accept it from a Goy? Make it afkamina both in the case of a Jew. He didn't accept upon himself own Savazola, right? The Kabul Amora Alei. Where do you say that you cannot accept it? If the owner did not accept full responsibility, then it's son barzal. Our Mishnah says, "Ein makabel." First words on our Mishnah, top of the page. Ein makabel son bar Yisrael. Oh, when is that? All right. Where the owner did not accept responsibility, meaning he put all the responsibility on the recipient, then it's like he's paying ribit on Savazola. If the owner accepted full responsibility, then it's not so sharp dummy. Then it's okay because you're not getting ribit because the owner took all full responsibility. It's like you're just my shlich, you're my worker. Ella Marava, that's not a good answer. In both cases, it's son barzal. Son barzal, why? Because the recipient accepted responsibility. If the owner accepted responsibility, it's not the son barzal. Amarava, he didn't accept responsibility. So why by Bechor, if that's the case? Again, and the goy gave me an animal, and the animal had a baby. Okay, that baby belongs to both of us. And if that baby had another baby, why is that other baby put from Bechor if it's some firstborn male? Why? Kivin. Why? Kivin de lo yav zuzi. If I don't have money to pay the guy's going to come now and want half the profits, right? If I don't have any money, I'm out of cash. He's going to take the animal itself, right? The animal itself, even though we're both equal shares in it, I don't have any money, he's going to take it. If this behemoth is not around either, he'll grab the bloodus. It's like a guy, it's like there's a hand of a guy is in there, meaning like he's a partner. Whenever the guy has a hand in some that's how we get out of court today. How do you get out of court today? You have a goyish partner, right? We had a farm in South Africa, and if you had firstborn males of a cow, goat, or sheep, technically, if it's a firstborn and it doesn't have a mum, it's kaddish. You're not allowed to do anything with it. It's hektish. You can't bring it as a carbon. The answer is you have a goyish partner, and he says it like that, meaning because he could always go and grab it. Bechora, it's yad nachar be'emtza anyway, because it's half the Jews, half the guys. If it was done la'emtza, depending on how the deal was done. Now we're going back to, we talked here about you're allowed to take ribbis from a guy. That's what the Mishnah said, right? You're allowed to take ribbis and give ribbis to a guy. The Torah said that. So the Gemara now brings down in Mishlei, it says, Mar b'hona ben eshech u'v'tarbis, one who increases his assets via interest. So if you take interest, l'chonen dal mikbetzenu, he will be gathering it for the person who has pity on the poor. That's what Shlomo Melech says. If you make your money by interest, you know what's going to happen? Your assets are going to go to the person who has pity on the poor. Who is that? What do we mean by that? The one who has pity on the poor. Amaravka going Shmuel Malka. Shmuel Malka was a king, the Persian king, was a friend of Shmuel. And what was it? Why was he called Shmuel Malka? Because he would take money from the Jews and distribute it to the Goyim. That's what he would do. Rashi says it's not really to the poor of the Goyim. Rashi says he gives it to the Goyim, not necessarily poor. They're called Dalim, Shem Dalim and a mitzvahs, because they are bereft of mitzvahs. That's why they're poor. In other words, if you take interest, you know what's going to happen? The government's going to take it and give it to the Goyim anyway. That's Ashmas. Amar Rav Nachman. So Rav Nachman said something. Amar li Huna. Remember those words. Amar li Huna. Huna told me that lo nitzcha. What does it mean? El dafilu ribbis You know what he's teaching me? When he says mar bahono beneshech marbis, you're going to give it to the goyim, even if you take ribbis from goyim. That's also bad. Eisvei, what do you mean? You can't take ribbis from goyim? Eisvei, Rav Nachman. Pasuk says la nachri sashach. Nachri, you should take ribbis from them. My tashach, lo lav tashach doesn't mean you should take ribbis from them. It says lo tashach means you should give them ribbit. You should borrow money from them, give us. So Gemara says lo sagi la baki. You have to. I mean, do I have to make sure I always borrow money from them, pay the ribbis? It says no. La puke achicha de la puke achicha de lo. It means this. It doesn't mean say you have to give them. It means that you should only give ribbis to a guy. Don't give ribbis to another Jew. So achicha behedik achicha says beferish. You're telling me when it says lanachri sashach, it means you should give ribbis to the guy. In other words, you're saying really you can't take ribbis from a guy. Not to take ribbis at all. That's what he said. Also, if you get money that way, it's going to be a bad sign for you. You're going to give it to the government. You like I say, you shouldn't take ribbis from a guy. So what about lo nesishach? It means you should give them ribbis. You have to give them ribbis. No, it means to say you should give ribbis to the guy, but not give ribbis to the Jew. So achicha behedik kasubei. But I mean, I don't need a pasuk for that. That your brother, that you shouldn't give ribbis to your brother, says beferish ulachicha lo sashach. It says you shouldn't give a ribbis to your brother, to your fellow Jew. It says lavar alav esev lo saseh. Lachicha lo sashach, that's a lav. And lanachri sashach is that I say you should give ribbis to them, which and you deduce from there that you shouldn't give ribbis to a Jew. So if you give ribbis to a Jew, you're over on the lo saseh of achicha lo sashach and the aseh of lanachri sashach. Okay, so that's what you say, but you're saying here that you should give ribbis to a goy, not that you have to, but you shouldn't give ribbis to a Jew, but you shouldn't take ribbis from a goy. Apparently, that's what Rahuna said. You shouldn't even take ribbis from Eisvei. What do you mean? What do you mean you shouldn't take ribbis from a goy? It says love and mayhem. The Mishnah said love and mayhem. You can borrow from them, umalvan them, and you can lend them. You should borrow from them and lend to them. Beribis with ribis. You're allowed to take ribis from them. What? Just to make a living. It's here. Just enough to make a living. In other words, if you're a banker and you need to make money, so just make enough. Make enough. You'll take from ribis just to make enough, but you shouldn't take too much. Just enough to make a living. But if you take too much, that's not good because maybe the whole idea of ribis will cling to you so much that you'll start taking ribis from Jews also. That's how. That's what Rav Chia bar Rav Huna explained the pasuk of the Mishnah. Or the Mishnah, he says the Mishnah. Yeah, you could take ribis from them, but not too much. So, but if you make a lot of money, Shlomo Melech said from them, that's a bad thing. Ravina Amar. Here, you know what it means when it says you could take ribis from a goy. It means like so we're talking about a Talmud Chacham. Talmud goes Rabbana. Why did the rabbi say even though the Torah clearly permitted taking ribis from a goy, why did the Torah prohibit it? Right? Why did the rabbis? The Torah permitted to take ribis from goy. Why did the rabbis forbade it? Why did the rabbis say you shouldn't take ribis even from goyim? Talmud goes Rabbana Shami Yom Masa because if you take ribis from a goy, you'll do business with him. You'll do business with him, and you might come to act like him. Even the Talmud Chacham who lo yom masav. Since he's a Talmud Chacham, you won't learn from his masav. In other words, that the Mishnah is speaking about a Talmud Chacham. Talmud Chacham can take money because he's going to be smart and he'll abstain from from being too close to the guy. But otherwise, the rabbi said you shouldn't do it. And the famous story that Rabbi Breyer was talking about that a Jew and a guy were waiting for the train in Zurich, and the guys came up to him and said, "What time is it? What time do you have?" And he wouldn't answer him. He says he kept asking. He says he wouldn't give him the time. So he said, "Afterwards, why wouldn't you tell me what time it is?" He said, "Well, I'll tell you. You're asking me what time it is, right? Then I'll tell you what time. Then you ask me where I'm going. Then you ask me about my family. Before you know it, you'll marry my daughter. I don't want to intermarry with you, so I don't want to get too close to you." So he says, "I'm staying away from you. Be careful. A Jew will be smart. A Talmud Chacham will be smart." So here he says, our Mishnah speak about a Talmud Chacham. And the reason why the rabbi said, even though the Torah permitted taking ribis from a guy, is that you shouldn't come too close. Try not to be too busy. You'll have lunch with him. You'll go out with him. You'll invite him to the weddings, etc. You're going to get too close. But a Talmud Chacham will be smart. Now, we started this by saying, what did Shlomo Melech talk about? Shlomo Melech said that if you increase your money by interest, you're going to give it to the guy. You're going to give it to the government at the end, who's going to distribute it to the guy. Some say that Rav Huna said that Huna said something else. And this. Pasuk says, Im Kesef Michael. What does Pasuk say? Im Kesef Talve Esami, you're laying down on Cholamoid. Im Kesef Talve Esami, if you lend money to my Jewish people, Esa Ani Imach, to the poor among you. What does that mean? Lend money first to my nation, to my poor, to the poor. What does it mean? Ami v'nachri. If it's a choice of lending money to the Jewish people or to a guy, Ami Kodem should first lend to the Jew. Ani ba'ashir, a poor Jew or a rich Jew, Ani Kodem, right? If a rich Jew wants to invest, you give him money for investment, first give it to the poor person. Ani yecha v'ani yecha, even if it's your poor Jewish people of your poor, your family, let's say, or other poor people in the city, Ani yecha kodmi, your family should come first. If it's poor people from your city or people from another city, you should first give to your people in your city first. Amar Mar, so that was what the Brisa said, right? That the Brisa says that. Amar Mar says, Ami v'nachri, if it's a choice of giving it to my nation, to the Jewish people, or a goy, Ami kodem, shita, isn't it obvious? I need a pasuk for that. In Kesef Tamas Esam, first give money to the Jewish people. I need a pasuk for that. Isn't that obvious? Amar Nachman, Amar li Huna. This is where Rav Nachman said, Huna told me, when Huna said before, you shouldn't take ribbis from a guy, right? He says like this, even if a guy is willing to give you ribbis, you're going to make money on the loan, and the Jew is not, you should still give money first to the Jew. That was the point what Huna said. I feel ribbis, even if you can make money on the guy, which is permitted according to the Torah. You can take money from a guy, you're allowed to. You can call that you need to make a living, no problem. You could do that. But you should better give your money to a Jew without interest than give money to a guy with interest. Rabbi Biederman quoted the Chassam Sofer, a great pasuk. He says, Im kesef talve esami. What does that mean? He says, people don't think they're going to take their money with them. They always back money l'olam haba. Money doesn't go into the kever. Nobody takes money. Nobody can take it with them, right? If you want to take your money with you to olam haba, im kesef, you want money, Talvasami, lend it to the poor people. If you lend money to the poor people, then you're taking the schus of the money to Olam Haba. We told the story with a Kapishnitzer Rebbe. Kapishnitzer Rebbe once, a poor man came to his house looking for money, and he saw that the man had a torn up yarmulke, a shmat on his head. He felt so bad. He went and he went to his drawer and took out a brand new, out of the plastic, and took a brand new kippah, and he gave it to the poor person and after he gave him a donation, and sent him on his way. So the Rebbe's family said to him, you're wearing a very nice yarmulke too. You could have given him the one that you're wearing, which is also a not very beautiful one. Keep the new one for yourself. He says, I did keep the new one for myself. By giving it to the poor person, I kept the new one for myself. Chodesh Tov to everybody. Kol Tov.